Eva, and I'm reminding you of the 4 cardinal rules of gun safety. First, treat all guns as if they're always loaded. Second, never let the muzzle point at anything that you're not willing to shoot. Third, keep your finger off the trigger until your sights are on target and ready to shoot. And lastly, be sure of your target and what's behind it.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message. I love you. Now, back to our show.
Let's take a look at accidental discharge versus negligent discharge. So on one side, let's try to understand an accidental discharge. And let's take a look at the difference with a negligent discharge. Some of you may have heard this term before, whether it happened in a shooting range, a competition, or anywhere else. So let's understand these two different terms. An accidental discharge, to understand it in a simplified manner, is a discharge, an occurrence where the gun fires accidentally, or it was an unintentional fire due to the equipment failing. So the gun unintentionally fired when it wasn't supposed to, due to the equipment or the mechanisms inside it, the safeties, the firing pin, the whole striker system, or what have you, failing inside, thus resulting into the gun firing when it wasn't supposed to. Now, the negligent discharge traces down to the gun unintentionally firing, however, due to a human factor or a human interaction with the gun. Not, in other words, it was the person's fault due to negligence, not paying attention, or recklessness that the gun fired. So, to easily differentiate these two, I will demonstrate and explain some points. So first, let's take a look at this. This is a Glock 17. Now we have a magazine with a copper jacketed hollow point. So I'm gonna actually load it. You see that round going in? The gun is loaded. Now I could just leave this gun over here, lying around. I'm 100% confident that that gun will not fire. In the event that the gun does fire, my hand's nowhere near it, no human interaction with it. You could classify that as an accidental discharge, because it was the mechanisms of the gun that failed to keep it in a safe state. Now the Glock, I'm not worried because it actually has 3 safeties. It has the trigger safety, so you could see that thing popping out in front of the trigger. Unless that thing is depressed, the trigger can't move to the rear, fire the gun. There is also a firing pin safety located at the fore end of the striker, so it blocks the firing pin from going forward unless the trigger is fully pulled to the rear. So that safety moves out of the way and the firing pin can freely move forward. And it has a third safety over here, the drop safety, wherein the trigger bar actually blocks the bottom end of the striker. If you've seen a Glock striker, it looks kind of like a cylinder with a metal bar popping down. The trigger bar and connector actually block that in the fully cocked position right now. And unless you pull the trigger again to the rear, that thing will block the bottom of the striker. When fully pulled to the rear, the trigger, it moves down and away from it, so the striker can freely move forward. Now, many guns nowadays are designed very safe. Again, even older designs, a 1911, this actually has 3 safeties as well. So we have first a passive one, the grip safety, wherein the gun, fully cocked, ready to fire, it will not fire unless you depress this grip safety. It won't fire, depress it, it will fire. So that's the first safety. Second safety is this manual thumb safety. And there's actually a third safety. And this is the older design, this is the one without the firing pin safety. There's actually a third safety also here. In the event that the hammer does fall, disengages the sear, without the trigger being pulled, let's say it fell, there's actually a half-cock notch. See that on the sear, wherein the hammer will not fully touch the firing pin. That's the half-cock notch. See a little space there? And that's when it's fully fired. You can see the difference. So many guns, in other words, are designed very safe. And accidental discharges, if you account them, they probably consist 1% of cases or occurrences. And negligent discharges, you could probably account 99% or majority of the occurrences as negligent. So it's easy to understand whenever there's human interaction with a gun, most likely that guy's finger was on the trigger, that guy or girl, the gun fired, whether it was intentional or unintentional, whether it was subconscious or not. If there was human interaction, that is a negligent discharge. Like, as we know in the 4 rules of gun safety, you know, we're always accountable. The gun's always loaded. If our finger was on the trigger, then we were responsible that we know the gun can fire. We're supposed to be aware of our target. We're supposed to be aware of all conditions when we handle the gun. So whether it may be an accident where, oh, the gun fell off my table and I reached for it, in that split second, you better be aware that if you do grab that gun and you have no control, it can fire. So some people may say, well, what if my finger was not on the trigger when the gun fired? I was in a competition, I was just holstering my gun. Actually, I removed the magazine and I racked the slide to clear the gun, but the cartridge blew up in my face. So sometimes, even if our finger is not on the trigger, there are people who actually modify their guns or customize it. And there are cases wherein some people make an unsafe equipment combination or modification. So some people would actually modify their trigger to be extra wide. Some people may modify their ejector, so when they pull out when they try extracting and ejecting their cases, the primer actually strikes the ejector. Or their extractor may have been modified out of tension, may have been loose. They could have modified their safeties. Some people may remove their trigger safety. They may try to modify their manual safety, their grip safety. Some people might even try modifying their sear to get a really light trigger pull. And in these accounts, when the people said, my finger wasn't on the trigger, I racked the slide, I was just holstering my gun, they are still accountable for these discharges because the human interaction was there. They modified their gun intentionally, so they are held accountable for those discharges. So one interesting line I've seen saying is, it is upon the user to test his or her equipment and make sure it is safe before using it. In summary, accidental discharges are actually pretty rare due to the modern designs of firearms, which are very safe. An accidental discharge would occur when the equipment has an internal mechanical failure, thus letting that mechanism fired around in the gun when it was not supposed to. A negligent discharge would occur majority of the time when there is a human interaction with the gun. So whether that guy was handling the gun, he modified the gun, his finger was on that trigger, or he was manipulating the gun in an unsafe fashion, whether he was aware of it or not, that can be traced as the source of a negligent discharge. As we can see, the Glock has still not fired. So let me safely handle it, unload it,
Ay, baulinan! Ano? Ay, baka. Okay, hammer down. Okay. Use your skill. Stop. Time 1737.